pass through. And Paradise Valley's got that old, like impervious. Well, I found out that mound was actually dumped there in the 70s by the Ministry of Transportation. Doesn't surprise me at all. No, seriously. Yeah. They did that. They're like, oh, here's some farmland, we'll just dump a bunch of fill. So now it's like, what? There's fill that was dumped on your property? I'm like, yeah, it was done like 40, 50 years ago by the province. Like, it was you guys. And now it's not even really fill, it's just clay. Yeah, so I feel like I'm at my other job. And the good news is that I've got several feet of topsoil. Yeah. So I'm pulling a bunch of that. I'm going to level that party there. Hey.
Okay, it looks like we're at 12:30, so are we good to go?
Yes, thank you, Chair. We're ready to go.
Okay, so
recording in progress.
Every time.
I will call this meeting of the Finance Committee of June the 5th, 2024 to order. And I'll start with acknowledging that we are gathered today on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Tla'amin Nation, as well as all Coast Salish First Nations on whose traditional territories we have the honor to live, including my home on Wai'ete, also known as Lasqueti Island. So we have an agenda before us. Are there any additions or changes? And if not, would someone like to move approval? Director Gisborne, Director Lennox, is there any discussion on this? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? None opposed, carried unanimously. Okay, we have two sets of minutes. The first set is from May the 1st, 2024. Are there any changes or omissions anyone would like to add? And if not, would someone like to move adoption? Director Gisborne, seconded by Director Doubt. Thank you. Any discussion on this? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? None opposed, carried unanimously. And we have minutes from the May 21st, 2024 Finance Committee meeting. Are there any changes or errors? Seeing none, would someone like to move adoption? Director Gisborne, seconded by Director McCormick. Thank you. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? None opposed, carried. Very good. So the next, no delegations, no unfinished business, no correspondence. We're on to reports. So first up, 8.1, the 2023 report of directors' remuneration, expenses, and contracts. What is the board's, I guess first we'll try to follow our new format. So are there any questions around the table? And if seeing none, then would someone like to make a motion?
So moved.
Move the recommendation. Okay, Director Lennox, seconded by Director Gisborne. Is there any discussion on this? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? All in favor, none opposed. Thank you very much. Next is 8.2, Statement of Financial Information, the SOFI. Are there any questions around the table for staff? Seeing none, would someone like to make a motion?
So moved.
Okay, move the recommendation by Director Lennox. Is there a seconder? Yes. Director Brander, thank you. Discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? None opposed, carried. Okay, we're flying through this. 8.3, the interim financial statements from April the 30th, 2024. Are there any questions for financial staff? Okay, seeing none, would someone like to make a motion?
I'll move the recommendation.
Move the recommendation, thank you. Is there a seconder? Director Gisborne. Any discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? None opposed, carried unanimously. Okay, 8.4. Myrtle Pond Water System Boundary Extension Policy and Reserve Fund Bylaw, revised version. Are there any? Okay, Director Gisborne.
Sorry, I was getting excited to move.
Okay, are there any questions on this? And if not, Director Gisborne is moving the recommendation. Seconded by Director Lennox. Is there any discussion? Sorry, Director Gisborne.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to say thanks to our staff. This is something in terms of process that came up by L. Sebring. You know, if there's something that we get that we're not entirely happy with, let's kick it back to staff and then they can refine it. My concern at the last Finance Committee meeting appears to have been met perfectly by our staff. So big thanks. It's made the policy very clear that through a boundary extension at the written request of property owners, and I liked how the changes have been highlighted in red here so that it makes it very clear to everyone that, you know, the expansion of the service is initiated by the public and by the landowners. So that when the public sees the policy, they're not thinking, okay, the regional district is planning to, push a service into their area that they don't want. So I'm very happy with this, and big thanks to our staff. So our finance committee and our board moving forward, if there is anything that comes up that we go, you know what, this is 90 or 95% complete, but maybe there's that other 5 or 10% that we want, kick it back to staff and they can refine it. And there's a few other small changes in here that weren't related, just kind of in terms of language. And I also like those changes as well. So I'm happy to move the motion, and I'm also happy to vote in favor of it. So big thank you.
Thank you, Director Gisborne, and I concur. Those are good comments. I concur with those sentiments. Is there anything else? No, seeing none, then I will call the question on this. All those in favor? None opposed, carried unanimously. Okay, 8.5, the municipal solid waste.
Sorry, Chair. 8.4 part 2 is a separate motion.
Sorry, thank you. Thank you for that, Director Gisborne. Okay, 8.2 second is to move this to the bylaw to the so I recommend that the board give first reading through adoption at the next board meeting. Director Gisborne moved. Is there a seconder? Director Lennox, any discussion on this second item? Thank you. All those in favor? None opposed. Item 8.42 is carried. Thank you, Director Gisborne, for that. Okay, now we're on to 8.5, municipal solid waste tipping fee increase. Are there any questions for staff on this before we get into motions? Seeing none around the table, would someone like to make a motion? Director Doubt is moving the recommendation, and Director Gisborne is seconding it. Is there any discussion on this? Okay, seeing Director Gisborne.
Yeah, maybe it was better to have it out of the question. Read the staff report, great info. I know that this was being discussed in relation to additional costs in relation to municipal solid waste. And this has come back with, I think, a good amount. And I'm just wondering, is there any justifiable amount that could be potentially higher? I'm not saying let's change it now. I'm just kind of thinking for in the future. Or is that going to be something that staff is going to be paying attention to? And then next year we can potentially see maybe a bit more refined, because it's not just the cost of getting the garbage down to Washington. It's also, all the other costs associated with having, the garbage dealt with.
Mr. Schwab, is that something you might be able to answer?
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair, I can provide some insight, but I think Mr. Cowenhoven could probably provide more details. Yes, we are reviewing all of the actual tipping fees. There will be a fairly comprehensive report probably coming in the future that will deal with more of that information.
Thank you. And I don't know, Mr. Cowenhoven, if you have anything else to add to that. I should have probably passed it to you first, but
thank you, Chair. No, nothing to add.
Okay, thank you. That's good. Are there any other questions?
Director Doubt.
Oh, Director Doubt. Sorry, I have to pin the boardroom to the screen. Otherwise, it gets small when someone speaks. Okay, go ahead, Director Doubt.
I just want to say why I'm supporting this. And it's because, to me, it makes more sense to move more towards a user pay system than taxation generally to pay for it, and to try to cover the actual operating costs more closely with what they really are, that are variable depending on the amount of waste that's transferred at the transfer station. So I'm in favor of it. We spent a lot of time talking about what the appropriate amount of the tipping fee should be. I'm willing to support this, and as I say, moves towards user pay from just general taxation. And I think that's a good idea.
Thank you for that. And I'll just add my sentiments to that, which I want to thank staff for looking into this and doing a detailed review and coming up with what I think is a good number to settle on. And I agree, it's something that we should keep an eye on and make sure that we're not, that is a user pay for waste. If our goal is to get towards zero waste, we need to make sure at least those who produce the waste are paying the full cost. Okay, is there any further discussion on this? Seeing none, I will then call a question. All those in favor? None opposed, carried unanimously. Okay, 8.6, Savary Wharf fire protection. Are there any questions for staff on this item before we get into motions? Seeing none. Sorry, Director Dout.
Yeah, so maybe too simple a question, but the question for staff is how will these costs, or what service will these costs be paid from? Is it simply a Savary Island service, or an Area A service, or a general administration service?
Mr. Thomas?
If I could, through the chair, both the Savary Wharf and the Savary Island Volunteer Fire Department, the Fire Protection Service, are paid only by property owners, taxpayers on Savary Island. So this proposal, if it were to make it through the budget deliberations, that's who would pay for it, would be simply Savary Island.
Thank you.
Is there any other discussion or questions, I should say? Seeing none, then I'll entertain a motion if someone would like to make it.
So moved.
Director Lennox making the recommendation, Director Gisborne seconding. Is there any discussion on this, Director Lennox?
Yeah, just briefly, I think I appreciated the presentation that we got from the fire department and the original stakeholders in this, and showing that they're taking action, right? Not waiting for something. They know that there's a need in the community. And I think the report is quite good in the fact that we need as many details. Again, we say this often as possible, because just the inclusion in this infrastructure is related to other infrastructure in that facility, and there's a lot of work going on with that. So I appreciate CIMAC as well being involved, and but also getting this work underway. I know how busy Mr. Toms and your department's been, and there are a lot of regular questions, what's going on, and so I appreciate this coming to us now and fully support it, of course. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Lennox. Is there anyone else? I'll add a couple words myself, which is just to say, I think the case was made very well for this, and I think it's a good recommendation. I was a little envious of the number of water tanks. There's a photo in there seeing it. Lasqueti, we had 2 put in last year, and I think there's 2 more on their way. And I guess they're the big ones, but still, Lasqueti could use more, but that'll be a process. So I think it's great. It's really good to have these resources. You pay up front, and then some people might say, well, why are we spending the money, until they see those flames, and then they wonder why they're not there. So it's proactive. So I think it's a good way forward. Okay. I don't see any other hands up, so I will then call the question on this. All those in favor? None opposed, carried unanimously. That's great. So now we're on to the financial assistance policy amendments, the revised. Are there any questions for staff before we get into a motion? Okay, seeing none, would someone like to make a motion on this? Director McCormick and Director Gisborne, so that's the recommendation. Any debate and discussion on this? Director McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to support this because I think it encompasses as kind of option 3 in the report. It encompasses all of the various proposals and includes the items that I think are really worthy of updating. Certainly one of the challenges I found with the current application form is that you're looking for how much it is that they're actually applying for, and somewhere it's buried deep in their budget figures, but there's nothing on the questionnaire. So I think that's a huge improvement. And we may still get questions. So Chair, something that we need to, I guess, be prepared for regarding why they don't have the different funding streams. So, that may be a question out there. But altogether, I like these recommendations, and I'm very happy to support them. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion? I'll say a couple words, which is to thank staff for taking one more round on this. I know we were almost there last meeting, and I threw a bit of a wrench in by, suggesting we include a bunch of language, and it was appropriate to send it back to staff. And I appreciate the work done by Ms. Lillies and others on getting that wording in. I think it's much improved this way, and I really like having a line for where the exact amount is to be requested. I don't know how that was not seen before, but there's been other times when I've really wondered, what exactly are they asking? You're searching for it. It's in the text. It's in their budget. It's not in their budget. It's down in their language, or they're not saying it at all. And really, this really makes a makes it easy for us, makes it easy for the groups to say, this is exactly what they're asking. Because some groups wouldn't even ask, they'd say, well, we'd like this, but how much? So I think it really forces, we need to know, and we need to debate numbers, not not have to search. So I think that's a really big improvement all around, and I think this is a good step forward. Okay, is there any other discussion on this? Seeing none, I will then call a question. All those in favor? None opposed, carried unanimously. Very good. So now we're on to financial assistance intake, 2020 financial assistance 2024 intake number one. And we yes, CAO, yes. Sorry, I'm juggling.
Yes, thank you,
things here.
through the chair. I just wanted to make a suggestion that you've already seen the presentations, and if you're good with the presentations and you're fairly good with all of the requests, that you could consider moving them in a block if you so desire.
Okay, that's a very good idea. So what maybe first, I'll ask if there's questions, and then we'll consider this as a block, and any item that a director might want to pull out could be pulled out and handled individually, and otherwise any that we're not needing to debate, that we're all unanimous on, we can pass as a block. That could be an efficient way to do it. Okay, so first we'll offer questions. So are there any general questions about the process? Director Brender.
Thanks, Chair. I'm curious if, just speculative, if we actually were to approve everything that is suggested in this motion, do we have a running total as to where it would leave the different electoral areas financially?
So that's our financial staff. Ms. Lilly, I think, would be, or
Page 13 of 387.
it's in there, but I'll let the Lillies explain.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As of right now, we have $41,356.63 that would be remaining for intake 2 if all of these recommendations were accepted.
Thank you.
And Director Brander, just to add, I was curious myself, and last year, how much is in the second intake? And last year, I believe it was about $26,000 was what we paid. Now, of course, that varies a lot between years, but that's how much was paid out in the second intake last year.
Oh, yeah, there it is. Thank you. I guess my concern with it is that there's such a variance between different electoral areas that requests coming in the fall. Hard to spread it out over most of the different areas. We deal with that if it comes up. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I guess that 41,000 would be, distributed among the general and the electoral area grants and aid. And I believe it's about $8,000, close to $8,000 would be left in general, and then the rest would be balanced among A to E. And of course, area A would have the most left because it has the most to begin with.
Actually, that's not true.
In this case,
Area most left.
for this round, maybe.
For this round.
It's from over 13,000 down to $437.
Okay, are there any other questions about general on the process, or Director Gisborne?
Yeah. It's a question about the list here. And I recall, 6 months ago, 8 months ago, ORUG came up and it was some discussion around, a long-term agreement. And I believe it was the chair had said that he'd spoken with the president of ORUG, and that, $23,000 to ORUG annually would be a good amount. But they put in a request for $43,000. And I remember having some concern at the time that $23,000 might not be enough for what ORUG needs, because I've seen a number of years their requests are usually quite a bit higher than $20,000. And myself, just one vote, I'm actually very happy to support the work that ORUG does, because it's a lot of physical labor out in the back country. And, I always think, how much would the work they cost if it was provided by government, and it would be substantially more than $40,000. So I guess my question is, if we pass this as a block, then they get a 3-year funding agreement at 23,000. Could we change that? Could we give them more? What they ask?
CAO.
Through the chair, could I ask Celine Lillies if ORUG agreed to a 3-year term?
Ms. Lillies?
Yes, thank you, Chair. ORUG has not agreed to sign the agreement that was proposed at 23,000 per year. They indicated that they would prefer to apply each year and see if they can get more than 23,000.
And I'll add 2 notes on that. One is the motion in the package does not include an agreement, as far as I can see. There are agreements included for other groups, but not ORUG. And I think that was my main point. So I'll leave it there. There was something else I had, but it just evaporated from my head. So Director Gisborne.
Yeah, I guess maybe I'm just confused because the first motion of this proposed block, the committee recommend that the board direct staff to notify grant and aid applicants who have been selected by the board to enter into funding agreements by the Cathett Regional District, but signing so on and so forth. So that's where my question comes up about ORUG, because my understanding was that we kind of had passed a motion saying, let's do this multi-year funding agreement of $23,000. And now we're hearing that, you know, they would actually prefer more and they would prefer to do it on a year-to-year basis. So I actually support going that route rather than the multi-year funding agreement. So I guess a question to our staff, would that require us to rescind a previous motion, or I think our CAO has a good idea as to where I'm going.
CAO, and I'll first add a couple comments, was just to say, I believe when, you know, I would interpret the word selected by the board to be the groups that we're selecting with this block of motion. So we're identifying in these items a number of groups, and I believe that's what's the intent there. But the CAO maybe has some further information.
Thank you. Through the chair. If I'm not mistaken, there was a previous board motion to actually go approach those entities and find out if they were interested. That's how we found out that ORUG would prefer to continue to submit annual applications. The other ones, to my knowledge, have agreed that they would like to sign on for dependable and predictable funding. So this motion only applies to those that are looking for that dependability and predictability. ORUG will remain outside of that and will continue to, at their own discretion, submit annually.
Okay.
Yeah, Director Doubt.
Yeah, just to be clear, what we're voting on if we pass this package is a 1-year contribution of $23,000 to ORUG.
Correct.
It's on the list.
Yeah.
And it does not preclude a ORUG from applying in the second intake if they so desire, and if there's money available. Okay, Director McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. I have a process question, and I don't know if it should be asked now or when we talk about individual things that we choose to remove. But my question is why community, large community events such as Logger Sports, Townsite Jazz Festival are funded by areas A, B, C, D, but a similar such event, the Texada Sandcastle Weekend, which is a regional event, brings people, many people from the mainland, why that is only funded by area D.
That's a fair question. Ms. Lillies?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I believe we were keeping with previous reports and recommendations, but I would like to refer this question to Cheryl Morrison, our accountant, if that's okay.
That's totally fine. Ms. Morrison?
Hi, the reason for the split is where a group has received funding from the city. They are funded then simply by A, B, C, and D. And where a group has not received funding or has not made application to the city, then they are funded under general. because general includes the city. So where the city has already made a contribution to that group, then they would be, they're just funded by the service areas.
And I'll just add before I go back to you, Ms. Director McCormick, is that the staff, I believe, do their best to provide these. These are just recommendations. So if any director wishes to propose a revised funding arrangement, then that's possible by pulling it out. CAO, or CAO has something, and then I'll go to Director McCormick.
Through the chair, and I believe staff used historical reference, because you know that this is our first year utilizing this. I'll call it the new format of how we're utilizing the funds in basically only two streams, either EA streams or the general grant and aid stream. And so they used, I think, historical record to mirror what was done in the past. If, for instance, Texada Sandcastle Days was only supported by Area D in the past, that's the way they continued. If they would like, if the director would like something different in the future, then I think it would be appropriate to make a note of that to staff so that they can include it for debate the following year in that regard.
Okay, thank you. Director McCormick, back to you.
Yeah, thank you. And it really isn't about the area grant or the general. It's about a third option, which is the 4 areas, A, B, C, D, contributing, as opposed to general or as opposed to single area. And I note that both Townside Jazz Festival and the Logger Sports both receive their funding from area A, B, C, D, including area D. So I guess my thinking is that really we have been categorizing Sandcastle perhaps inappropriately, and some of that may be because that's the way the applicant filled out the form. I can't say, but the reality is that they should be considered on the same basis and funded on the same basis as those other community events.
And I see the CIO, but before I hand it over, I'd say that what I'd suggest then to Director McCormick is when we get to the considering the block, you pull that one and we can have that debate. CIO?
Through the chair, with the director's approval, I would recommend that staff make a note of that for next year. And the reason I'm saying that is simply because based on how we have to, by regulation, distribute and allocate the funding based on assessment values, et cetera, in the EAs. If I'm not mistaken, there's only like $400 left over in area B. And I don't know how much more wiggle room you would have in order to maybe correct that this year.
Right, Director McCormick?
Well, thank you. By making that change, that would in fact correct it, because instead of the full $3,000 coming out of area D, it would then be split by the 4 electoral areas, and area D would pay its appropriate share of that, as it does for Logger Sports or the Jazz Festival. So that would put more money into the funds remaining in area D for the second intake.
CEO?
To the chair, for clarification, I don't think the director heard me. I said take note of that for next year, because area B, in my estimation, and Celine can correct me, only has $400 right now.
That's area D.
D.
Oh, that's area D, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Area B has $1,893.
So I stand corrected then, Chair. There could be some more playroom there for debate.
Okay. And if we pull it, then we can ask Ms. Lilly specific questions of what's available. And it may be that we, choose to adopt the recommended motion anyways, and take note, or we maybe see there's some wiggle room and make adjustments as appropriate. So are there any other Director Dowd?
I'm going to move that we approve the grant requests according to the list in the page as a block.
Well, I'll second.
Okay. Okay. But does anyone want to? We're doing this as a block. Are there items that would want to be pulled, Director Lennox?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm glad you asked that because I was wondering when we were doing that. So number 19 on page 11 there. In
Number
the
19.
synopsis.
Okay. Right. And
I'll
I would like,
elaborate if you like, but
no, we can just pull them and
Okay.
that's the
thanks.
I would like to pull the town site jazz one, and you'll see why. I won't elaborate right now, which is like it's hard for me to see which one's
18,
which, but
yeah.
18. Okay, 18 and Director Gisborne,
I'll pull number 9.
number 9. Okay. Did I see another hand up there? Director McCormick and then Director Brander. Director McCormick.
Thank you. I would like to pull number 21, which is Sandcastle, and also 22 and 23, which are related to each other.
Okay, and Director Brander.
Numbers 3, 4, 10, 14.
3, 4, and
A few of them. 3, 4, 10, and 14.
you are 10 and 14. Okay. So we narrowed it down a little bit. There. Okay. Any other ones we want to pull? Otherwise, we're going to be considering the block as a whole, other than 19, 18, 9, 21, 22, 23, 3, 4, 10, and 14. Okay. So is there any discussion, Director Gisborne?
Yeah, I'm just thinking, since we pulled so many and some of the numbers might fluctuate, I think it might be appropriate to table the block until we deal with those individual items, and then we can pass the block afterwards. Just because the final figures after we go through all those other ones might lead us to kind of go and take a couple other ones, because of course there's only so much water in the pool, I guess you could say. So I would move that. Well, I'll wait until other discussion, but then I would move a tabling of the block, if that makes sense.
Okay, is there any other discussion before Director Gisborne puts a motion to table? Director Lennox.
Yeah, sorry, just a question maybe for staff. Just looking at this quickly, I noticed the one, number 4 there is the only one with a recommended addition to that. Maybe just for folks watching and for me, explain why we're recommending doubling the request.
Okay, Ms. Lillies? And that one's being pulled, by the way, so we'll be discussing it.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Sorry,
do you want to
about
discuss it at that
wait.
time?
Yeah,
Okay, why don't we wait until we get to it, because it's
Thinking
being
of my
pulled.
own stuff.
Okay, thanks. Is there any other general discussion on the items that we haven't pulled? Seeing none, Director Gisborne, I believe, has a motion to table.
I'll move that we table the block until we deal with the items that have been pulled from the block.
Okay, is there a seconder for that? Okay, Director Lennox. Discussion on tabling this block of recommendations until after we discuss the pulled items. Okay, seeing none, then I'll call a question on this. All those in favor? None opposed. That carried. Okay, we're going to table the block, and then we'll see where we get to. Now, maybe if it's okay with the board, I'll go through them in sequential order so we can follow our agenda a bit easier rather than the order they're pulled. Director Gisborne, you have to go to the bio break. Okay. Does anyone else want a bio break? Or we? Okay. So why don't we? I'll try to get these in order, and that way it might help moving sequentially through. So the first one, and I'll count on our corporate officer to correct me if I miss any. Is item 3, which is the recommendation for $7,500 to Powell River Therapeutic Riding Association, and a 3-year funding agreement. Director Brander and then Director Elliott.
Sorry, I have to declare conflict.
Oh, just so soon after you got here.
If you can just, I'm supposed to tell you why, right?
Yeah, you just arrived and now you're out. So yeah, well, okay, maybe Director Gisborne went back in time for that. Okay, Director Brander.
Thanks, Chair. I would like to move that we support it at the initial request of $5,000 for a 1-year term, because from what I understand, when they were asked to go into a 3-year, they bumped up the request. So I would prefer to just do a 1 year at 5,000 and let them call them back next year. And if they have more need next year, they can increase it next year.
Right. Okay. So so is there a seconder for that? Director Gisborne, so Director Brander just made a motion for the therapeutic riding for a 1 year at 5,000, which was their request last year.
That was their request this year.
The request this year. Okay. Is there any seconder for that, I guess, before we? Okay, Director McCormick. Okay, discussion on this motion. Seeing none, then I will call the question. Oh, CAO?
Something.
Clarification. We're talking about Powell River therapeutic riding, and it's a two-part motion. And so
number 3.
An alternate motion has been.
So the motion, as I understand, the motion that was moved is that the committee recommends to the board that the board approve a grant of $5,000 to the Powell River Therapeutic Riding Association for a 10-week fall therapeutic riding session occurring in 2024 from the General Grants and Aid Service. Period, and that's all.
Okay, clarification resolved. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Is that correct, Director Brender?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Is there any other discussion on this? Okay, Director Gisborne.
Yeah, maybe it happened when I was in the washroom. Just wondering why going from 7,500 down to 5,000 is being proposed. I'm just kind of wondering. Maybe that was already said.
Okay, Director Brender, maybe you want to explain again?
I mean, maybe we should turn to Ms. Lillies to clarify.
Okay, Ms. Lillies, could you clarify?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, they did apply for $5,000 originally, but because the agreement had been suggested by the board, we proposed the 3-year agreement to them at 5,000, and then that made them ask if they could up it to 7,500 instead, because they thought that if they lock into that for 2 more years, that 5,000 wouldn't be enough.
Thank you. So finish your question, and I'll add my comments to that, which I think the motion makes sense because clearly that response, which I can kind of understand, is not exactly the response we're anticipating or desiring from a multi-year agreement, is to give certainty to the taxpayer, and if they're asking 5,000 for 1 year, well then we can that seems to be a good approach to provide what's needed, and they can request what they need next year, and we can consider it. Director Doubt.
So I just want to make sure I understand. So I think what's being said is staff is saying that the Therapeutic Riding Association has turned down an offer of a 3-year funding agreement and wants to bump it up, or is willing to accept 5,000 this year, and no continual agreement, because I want to make sure we're complying with what their request was, because I think what they had originally done is applied for 5,000. They've been offered a 3-year agreement, and they're saying if they're going to enter into a 3-year agreement, it would have to be at 7,500. We're talking about not offering that, so I want to be clear whether we're offering a $5,000 1-year grant or continuing $5,000 over 3 years.
The motion on the table is 5,000 for just this year, and then the association would have an opportunity to apply for whatever amount they so desire next year. So they would have the flexibility to ask for the same amount or more or less if they needed it. And is that, I want to make sure, so just to confirm with Ms. Lillies, is that correct? And I believe that's the motion on the table.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, that seems reasonable to me, and yeah, I agree with that.
Okay, that answer your question, Director Doubt? Okay, is there any further discussion on this motion then? Seeing none, then I will call the question. All those in favor? None opposed? Carried. Okay, thank you. We're on to, we can call Director Elliott back in the room, I guess.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so the next one that was pulled was item 4, Director Brender.
Thanks, Chair. I don't have the actual figures in front of me because this one breaks up the payments into electorals A, B, C, and D. But if those numbers in the package add up to $4,000, I would like to have them cut in half so that they add up to $2,000, which was the original request. And it is for the same reasons as number 3, is when they were asked to go into a 3-year agreement, they doubled their request. So I say, let's just do a 1 year at 2,000. I'm happy with that.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. And I assume Ms. Lilly's, so are you able to calculate these on the fly, which this one looks simple as half.
By half.
Everything's in half. And I assume the motion on the table then is to, with all the revised parts, divide the numbers by 2, but not have the 3-year agreement clause.
Exactly.
Is that correct? Yeah. So it's been seconded. Any discussion on this? Okay, seeing none, then I will call the question. All those in favor? And none opposed, carried. Okay, so that's done. The next one on our list is number 9, which is the ORUG. So Director Gisborne.
Yeah, I'm thinking in line of moving $40,000. So question for the chair, technically procedurally, if they're all been moved as a block and then we pulled them as a block, have the items on the agenda already then been moved and seconded?
Sorry, no.
No.
Nothing was moved or seconded. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No, the items that were not pulled are moved and seconded and tabled, but the ones that were pulled are not moved.
Then I'll move $40,000 to ORUG from general grant and aid, and if there's a seconder, I'll speak briefly to it.
Is there a seconder for that? Okay, seeing no seconder. It's not been seconded, so we have no motion on the table for ORUG. Director Elliott.
Thank you. I just have a quick question. Is 23,000 the amount we were contemplating a multi-year agreement with ORUG last year, or is this something different?
Ms. Lilly's, I believe it is, but Ms. Lilly's can answer the question she feels.
Yes, thank you, Chair. That is the amount that was recommended by the board. I believe it was in February of last year.
Right, with the intention of being multi-year.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to move the motion in the package then.
Okay, thank you. Is there a seconder for that? Director Gisborne, discussion on that motion. Director Gisborne.
Yeah, I think $23,000. I'll support it because it's better than nothing. But in their package, they did request $43,000. And as I've said before, the amount of work they do in the backcountries is great. They also partner with a lot of other nonprofits. And of course, the more money they get, that means the more training they can have, the more materials and gas and mileage, and then the more other nonprofit organizations in the community they can partner with to get the important work done of the backcountry trails, which are a huge economic asset to our community. And it's a little odd because I do recall we had the discussion where it seemed like 23,000 was kind of what would be appropriate or what was kind of being requested by ORUG, that then we get an official request of $43,000. And I just think $23,000 is too low, but I would vote in favor of the motion that's currently before us, because if I vote against it, then I guess I get nothing. So
Director Elliott, then Director Lennox, and Director Elliott, Director Dowd, then Director Lennox, then Director Brander. Okay, Director Elliott. Oh, trying to keep the speakers list here.
Thank you. So I wanted to speak to the motion that I made. We spent considerable time last year debating the issue of ORUG. At the time, they were perfectly happy with 23,000 on a multi-year basis. And I'm not sure why we didn't move a multi-year agreement for ORUG in that amount, but my last conversations with that community group, and they did apply last year for more as well, but then verbally indicated a multi-year group of this amount would be something they would be in favor of. So I'm thinking that's what I had been told by them.
Discussed earlier in the meeting.
That they didn't
want to sign it.
They don't want to sign. Okay. So, anyway, that's why I made the motion. I was in favor of following through. They come back with something different. I'm sorry I wasn't here earlier in the meeting, but that's where I was at.
Okay, thank you. Director Dowd.
Your sound is breaking up, Chair.
Oh, sorry, I'll try to speak more towards the mic. Director Doubt, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. And as Director Brander has said, we earlier discussed the concept of a multi-year agreement, and what's in the package is a $23,000 commitment for this year. And while it might be nice to increase that by $20,000, when I look at page 13 of our package, the grants in aid in general, we're spending in this report $88,000 of the 96 available, and there is only $7,600 left that could possibly be distributed. If we were going to increase this grant by $20,000, we would have to decrease other ones in the package by at least $13,000. So I think this is a reasonable amount for ORUG, and we can expect them to have applications either later this year or next year for more money. They do great work.
They do indeed. Director Lennox.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just briefly, maybe for staff, I get the impression what we're seeing is maybe because of our new mechanism to outreach for the multi-year commitments, groups are now reassessing what they actually think they should be asking for over that time span. And I guess if you can confirm that part, do they have any way of, if they come, next year rolls around and this is completely off the map and they have to ask for more? Is there a mechanism?
CAO?
Through the chair, for the most part, these annual grants are for operations. They're for a specific event. They're for something that they've done annually. I don't think there's anything wrong with somebody that's got a termed agreement to ask for more money if it is something different than what they're doing. Because if it costs them $500 per year to keep the engine in their car going, then that's what that's for. However, if now all of a sudden they want to buy a tidy trailer to go behind it, that would be above and beyond what the original grant agreement was for. And I think they could apply for a separate grant for that. So as long as what they're asking for is different and separate from what the intention of the overall agreement tenure was, they should be eligible. However, I put a caveat on that, and that is, that's at your discretion.
Yeah, through the chair, thank you for that. Maybe that's the second part, maybe staff the first part. Are we seeing the discrepancies because once they've come to the table, they're thinking ahead going, oh, we should ask for more? Is that?
Ms. Lalise?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, through the chair, that does appear to be what's happening here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Lennox. Director Brander, you're next.
No, I was not on the list.
Oh, you were not on the list. Okay, I'll add myself on the. I'll put myself on the list, Director Gisborne, I guess, and then I'll go back to Director Gisborne. I guess two comments. One, to follow up on what the CAO was saying. I concur. I think when we're talking about contemplating a higher amount for a one-off kind of special case, that's very different because we can see whether we can afford it, but it's really spend the money and then we don't need to worry about the future implications as much. When we're talking about multi-year agreements or operational, ongoing operational expectations, increases kind of translate into expectation that will carry on. So, a higher level translates to, many years or even decades of higher levels. And it doesn't, of course, future boards can change what they choose to provide, but organizations do become, kind of reliant on this funding. And in terms of the effect on multi-year agreements, I do see this. I think maybe I saw these as a possibility of getting certainty for the taxpayer. Maybe groups would come in more modestly, but I guess the future uncertainty for their needs leads them to ask for higher levels. So it's not maybe working out precisely. And we got to be a bit careful if they're asking a level. We decide what's best for the organization. If they want a higher amount for a multi-year agreement, well, then our best approach in general should be to say, well, then 1 year amount at a lower level is better for us. So that I think makes some sense. Director, and then one other comment related to ORUG specifically. When we did the revisions to the financial assistance amounts and the budget, we didn't increase the amounts. And I know we had a lot of changes to the policy and the pots of money and the way we're doing this, but we chose to leave the budget flat. And that was, to sort of pin something down. But what that implies is this year's not a year that we can really afford to make big increases in some of the ongoing ones until we see how this all plays out. So we want to be a little bit cautious there. And ORG can potentially apply in the second intake if they so desire. Okay, I see Director McCormick who hasn't spoken yet, so I'll go to Director McCormick and then Director Gisborne. Director McCormick.
Thank you, Chair, and I'll be very brief. We can't force people to sign a multi-year agreement if they don't want to. I mean, it's clearly to people's advantage to do so, both for the certainty they have in terms of funding and the certainty that we have in terms of budgeting. But you can't force people at the end of the day to do that. So I think we should carry on, approve our 1-year grant for ORUG. And, perhaps next year they will work with staff to come up with a multi-year, a plan. So, but for this year, yeah, let's just move on. We can't force them to sign it.
Thank you. Director Gisborne.
Yeah, I got a question for our staff. When I was taking a look at various services in different contexts, I came to the understanding that if a service goes over budget for whatever reason, that it can come out of next year's taxation. Is the same true for the grant and aid service? Like, there's only so much money left in this year's budget, but if we as a board were to choose to go above budget, would it come out of next year's taxation like the other services, or is grant and aid kind of special in that requirement?
Ms. Lillies?
I had.
Oh, that's CAO, I see.
Through the chair. Logic tells me that it should, but I don't know what's defined in the LGA or any of the regulations. Specifically towards grants, I would be cautious not to do that because you do know what your intentions are. Whereas in another service, you may blow a pipe that you had no intentions, or it was totally unexpected. Therefore, it is an emergency and should be funded, has to be funded somehow. So I would caution against trying to do something over and above what you've already preset.
Yeah, but as a follow-up, so if we get the second intake and there's a very, worthy application, or say ORUG comes back and needs more money for something, that may be an option, but it's not really my first choice.
CAO?
Through the chair, tell you what, staff will do some investigation on that and let you know what the ramifications or boundaries are.
Thanks.
Yeah, and what we have done in the past, Director Gisborne, on occasion is in the second intake, we've pre-approved money for the next year, which means that the group doesn't get it, but they are we're getting them, that money approved so that when the next year starts, they can get it sooner without waiting for the grant and aid process. So that's another option. So I think that's something we can consider. Okay, is there any further discussion on item 9, financial assistant item 9? Seeing none, I will then call the question. All those in favor? None opposed, carried unanimously. Very good. So the next item that we pulled was item 10, which is the 3,200 for the recommendation for the Quebec Concert Band. Director Brander.
Thanks, Chair. I'd like to just modify the motion that's in the package and just say deny a grant of 3,200.
Deny the grant. Does anyone want to second that? Director McCormick seconding that. Okay, so the motion on the table is to respectfully deny the grant. Is there any debate on that? Director Brander.
Thanks, Chair. I have nothing against the concert band or anything like that. I just have one of the things that one of the lenses I look at these requests through is one that says, how many people is this going to serve? And I see this being quite a small organization, and there are a lot of people out there that are in bands of different types. Some are concert bands, some are rock and roll bands, stuff like that. And I just worry that we'd be getting many requests from multiple groups, and yeah, just not enough members of the public are being served by this grant.
Is there any further discussion on this? Director Doubt and then Director Elliott.
Yeah, so, you know, and I've seen the applications too. And I think different organizations fill them out in different ways. And it's quite a range in the, when you look at the actual applications, you know, some people's applications say things that look quite focused to me, like something that serves one or maybe two electoral areas, saying there is a benefit to 20,000 people. And other ones just leaving it blank, you know. And I just want to say that I think that concert band actually has a pretty wide effect. We're trying this weekend actually to have a battle of the bands or a joint band concert with people from Comox, and that got rained out. But there are a lot of people that attend those concerts that they put on in different places a number of times every year. I think they do actually provide a wider benefit than might be expected. That's
thank you, Edgar.
what I have to say. I would be in favor of giving the grant.
Okay, and if this fails, then another motion can be entertained for sure. So Director Elliott, and then Director, then I'll speak, and then Director Brander.
So the concert band is attempting to catalog and make accessible all of the music that they've already purchased over the years. And without some funding to accomplish that, the entire community and all of the folks who participate with the concert band don't have adequate access to music they've already purchased and are allowed to use. The concert band can have just about any musical group that wants to join and have access to all those already purchased music, and it's valuable, and they can catalog it and put it out there to the community so the community knows what they have, so other folks would not have to buy the privilege of using that music if they join and use what's already been purchased by the concert band for our community. So if you're in the arts community and you understand what I'm trying to say, this is not a small thing. They've over the years accumulated thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars worth of rights to use music in their productions and what they're doing. And they can partner with other organizations and do the same. So it's not a huge amount of money that because they're mainly trying to use volunteers and do it as cheaply as possible. I think it's an excellent project, and without digitizing and providing access to what they already have, they'll end up paying for more in the future. And it seems this is a good plan, and I support it.
Okay, thank you. So I have Director Brander and then Director Lennox.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
And I was going to speak, but I answered my own question, so I don't need to speak.
I love it when I do that.
Isn't this Director Brander second round?
Yeah, okay, maybe, okay, Director Lennox.
Yeah, that's fine. So
sorry to be a stickler.
No, thanks, Chair. So, you know, I'm in support of this particular grant. Again, as a product, I don't use it anymore, but I sure used a lot of sheet music back in the day. And it was, again, foundational for sort of who I became. And so those pieces are very expensive. I think this is a good example. The CEO has given us just explained to us about one-off requests, small groups that are just trying to get it done. And what am I hearing in media? High schools, community colleges are eliminating music programs and band programs specifically. And I think that this is a perfect example of you spend a little bit of money to capture it. And again, then it's open source. And, you know, when I was in choir, we would actually go and get band scores and then kind of just do our own thing with them, right? And so there's examples of what you might even not know is happening in the background with this material. And once it's done, it's there, it's paid for. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Gisborne, and then we'll do first time speakers first, and then Director McCormick. Director Gisborne.
I'll be very quick. You know, a lot of our grants are, you know, for one-off things. Someone's trying to, you know, we might have a request where someone's say trying to buy sheet music for the kids. This proposal isn't about getting new assets. This actually aligns more with our asset management principles. You know, they have the assets, but they're, what do they say, like 5 or 6 or 7 filing cabinets full. and they need someone to go through and maintain that asset. And I see that as an investment, because otherwise, you know, it might be several years down the line, they say, oh yeah, we lost all that material, now we got to go buy more stuff, and now we're asking for, you know, $10,000. So I'm actually against the motion to give them nothing. I would be happy to support the original motion in the package, because, you know, it's asset management, and I like to see nonprofits in the community doing asset management, not just our regional district. So that's my 2 cents. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Director McCormick.
Thank you. And, you know, I guess I just have to say that although I seconded the motion for discussion purposes, I'm really swayed by the passionate, you know, arguments that you've all put forward. So I would prefer to defeat the motion that's currently on the table and then entertain a new motion regarding giving them the grant.
Okay, thank you, Director Brander.
Thanks, Chair. Just 2 things. I wanted to point out that we are, just so people know, we are funding 100% of this if the motion passes. And I think I'll have to change the way I'm intending on voting as well. Thanks.
Okay, so seeing no other discussion on the motion, which is on the table, which is to deny the application, then I will call the question. All those in favor of denying the application? All those opposed? Unanimously opposed. So I won't list everyone's name, everyone. Thank you. So Director Elliott.
I'd like to move that the committee recommend to the board that the board approve a grant of $3,200 to Cadet Concert Band for the 2024 community-based concert band operations from the General Grants and Aid Service.
Okay, and Director Gisborne seconded. Is there any discussion on this? I'll just add just a couple of words, and I just to pick up on what Director Brander just said about 100%. You know, there is a bit of a concern with that, but it is a one-off project, so I'll go along with the motion. I don't have a problem with it. If we have a you know, multitudes of groups who want to come to help us support music events, that may be very different. Whereas this is a, you know, kind of unique project to do this kind of archival work. So I think it's I can support it. Director Doubt.
Yeah, and I don't want to spend too much time talking about the same thing. I think this is going to be supported. When we look at what the grant is for, it's actually the full cost of paying the wages for a summer student. And all of us know that there's going to be more cost to the project than that. It's going to require some supervision, some financial control, etc. And perhaps a more astute grant writer would have included the volunteer time that's going to be necessary in that. So just maybe a hint to people in the future who are writing grant applications to maybe look through our history and some of the things there, make sure they include all of the actual costs.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's a good point. So, are there any other discussion on this item then? Seeing none, then I'll call the question. All those in favor? None opposed. That carries. Okay, that brings us down to the next item, if I'm not mistaken, is number 14, which is the Powell River Skating Club. Director Brander.
Basically, whatever the package says, but I'm going to request we deny the grant as well.
Yeah, right, the package, yeah. 3,000. So the motion is to deny the skating club. Is there an application from the skating club? Is there a seconder for that?
For discussion purposes.
Okay, Director McCormick. Discussion on this. Director Brander.
Thank you, Chair. Similar sort of concerns on this one is that it serves a small percentage of the public, and that it may open a door for many other organizations to come to us for ongoing operational cost funding.
Good point. Is there any other debate on this? Okay, so the motion on the table is to respectfully deny. I will then call the question. All those in favor? Are those opposed? Director Lennox and is that Director Elliott's hand up? Yeah, opposed.
Yeah.
Okay, so 2 opposed. And the motion carries. So, okay. Next one is number 18, which I pulled for Townsite Jazz, and I would like to put forward a motion that includes Area E, and I'll explain if I get a seconder. So if is there a seconder? I got a second. Yeah, I know it's an odd thing, but I'll add myself to the name. So we'll get the specific wording. You know, I guess it's to check the quick math skills of Ms. Lily's on the fly. And I'll make a case for this, and that's, we've heard some groups, you know, I've often brought up, you know, when groups, you know, what should they or how can they reach out to Lasqueti Island? Townsite Jazz did. You know, Mr. Cummings, Paul Cummings brought the group to Lasqueti as we saw those photos. They seemed to really like it. There were a lot of photos in the report, a lot of discussion about it. I think it was great for the students from the high school. And I think it's fair and right. They get their full amount, doesn't change what they get. But I think it's fair and right to recognize that and have the Lasqueti taxpayer contribute. And it's, you know, it's not going to be, it's a few $100s difference. But I think it's really right. And I don't expect a lot of opposition from everyone else around the table. But is there any other discussion on this? We'll get the exact wording. Director Lennox.
Thanks.
Sorry.
Oh, corporate officer.
Just, we're moving a motion to do
Yeah,
this.
so the motion would be as it is with another clause to recommend that the board approve a grant of X dollars from Area E grants and aid, and then the amounts add up to the same recommendation.
And just one more, do we have a seconder for that motion?
Yes, we did.
Thank you. Perfect.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll, when the exact numbers are ready, Ms. Lillies, you can maybe read them off. I don't know if the committee particularly cares that much what those are. Director Lennox.
Yeah, just briefly, Chair. And no, there won't be any pushback from me on your motion. Thank you for that. I just want to say that, you know, the work of that Festival Society is ongoing. I happened to bump into their lead there on his way to Europe, to Amsterdam. To do what? To go to another music festival. To do what? To explore different ways of providing those festivals to smaller communities, in this case in Holland, but interacting with folks that live and work here. And it was just exciting to see, like, he continues to push for new ideas. He mentioned Lasqueti again, and you know, I mentioned how cool the effort was again. So just, you know, like I say, supporting this type of thing, I think, is important. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Gisborne.
Yeah, I'd like to thank the director from Lasqueti Island for offering up some of his own voters' money. I am a little hung up on the amount. The request or the motion is for $6,000. That's only coming from the electoral areas if this passes. And taking a look at the application, as per the application, Townsite Jazz has received $2,500 of financial support from the city of Powell River and $2,732 in kind, which means that the municipality's contribution, both financial and in kind, is less than $6,000. And I find it a little challenging to justify to the taxpayers that, you know, essentially 2/3 of the population you know, are paying less than the 1/3 that's out in the rural areas that's going to be providing $6,000. So just thinking about the whole equity thing just makes me a little bit challenged to support it, but I do think it's a worthwhile initiative, and I'm also very happy to see Paul Cummings running down or voting down to Lasqueti Island, and yeah, so it's just that kind of money amount has me a little bit on the fence, but I'll go with whatever the will is of the assembly.
Thank you. So I'll hand over to Ms. Lillies, maybe if you have the numbers so we have them for the record.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So with the Townsite Jazz staying at 6,000, but being distributed by ABC and D, we now have 2,661.87 from A, 919.72 from B, 1,257.41 from C, 796.08 from D, and 364.92 from E. And we've got now
already
D has been reduced. They now have 1,400, whereas at the beginning when we started there was only like 400. And we now have 50,357 roughly available for intake 2 at this point.
That's great. So we're getting, our dashboard has changed a little bit with more flexibility. Very good. Thank you for calculating those on the fly. I know it's, it's really great to be able to, that you're able to do that for us. Is there any, okay, so now we know what the numbers are. The areas A to D go down a little bit and area E picks up $364 from it. Is there any further discussion on this item, on this motion? Seeing none, then I will call the question. All those in favor? None opposed, carried unanimously. Okay, the next one up is number 19, which is the Wild Ocean Whale Society that Director Lennox pulled. Director Lennox?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm not even, this one's got me a little confused and I'm not even sure of a motion. I'm gonna have to think about this on the fly. Maybe you could just give me some latitude to describe my concerns.
Sure, describe, and maybe if you have any questions for staff to explain anything, but yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I mean, saw the presentation. I got a few things. Wild Ocean Whale Society does not mean much to me besides whales, and I think that I'd rather support whales at this time in area A. I've heard nothing about feral cat populations in area A. And thinking about that, they're very mobile, and I would think it would apply to other areas pretty quick. I guess for staff, area A looks to carry the major burden of this particular recommendation. It's brand new to us. Most of the work's gone on Texada. I can't support this motion the way that it's written.
Thank you. Maybe I'll translate that as a question to Ms. Lilly's. Just
explain
the allocation, which I think the simple answer is just because area the way the factors are calculated, but maybe just because this one's an unusual, which is A and D, and that's probably the first time we've done that specific match. So maybe Ms. Liz could explain the proportional allocation.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Through the chair, the way that we have to distribute the grant amounts is based on the property assessments. So what that does is it makes it so that area A carries 44.4%. And so when you only take one other electoral area in combination with that, especially one that has a lower overall assessment base, it ends up being that, yeah, $6,543 of that 8,500 has to be charged to electoral area A, and then 1,956 to D. So we can't change that. The only thing you could do is change the distribution. We can't change the percentages, is what I'm saying.
So you could change the total amount, you mean?
Or change the total amount, yeah.
Yeah.
Just to follow up, historically, what is our contribution to Wild Ocean Whale Society?
Ms. Lillis?
The same number, a lot less?
Last year, my records show $3,000. Is that correct, Ms. Lillis?
I'm just pulling
do the numbers, yeah. I guess I'm looking for a solution here. I don't want to leave them stranded, but I can't support this as it stands.
Yeah, I see Ms. Director McCormick, but I my record showed, I believe, 3,000 last year.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, Ms. Lillis?
Okay, sorry. Through the chair, it was 43.90 last year.
Oh, 43.90. Thank you. Sorry, I had something. Maybe we changed it. Okay, we have Director McCormick, then I saw Director Jout, and then Director Brander down the left side here. Okay, Director McCormick.
Yeah, thank you. Well, last year it was for a problem feral cat outbreak on Texada, and that's what the money was funded to deal with, and that's why Area D funded it. This year, when I recall reading their application, they said that that's, almost there. It's not quite finished, the work that they need to do. There's still a few more, trapping and taking to Comox for neutering and bringing back, etc. But now the work has shifted to Area A because that's where they've had a number of complaints about feral cat population, and they've identified a need for bringing that under control, which requires trapping the cat, taking it to Comox to be neutered or spayed, and then when it's ready, returning it back to the location in which it was caught in the first place. So that's what their program is all about. And I can't find the actual application in here. That's what I'm looking for. But I'm just thinking, do they not explain in their application that it is for a broader base this year than in previous years?
They do, Ms. Lillies and Director McCormick. The application starts on page 240 of 387 in the agenda. I know it's kind of voluminous, so it's a bit hard to find, but just in case that helps. Ms. Lillies, the question was, did they not explain in their application the broader nature of what they're applying for along the lines of what Director McCormick said?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Through the Chair, they did indicate that they are serving electoral area A as well as D this year.
And I'll also, just since I went to the page, add that to clarify the number, both Ms. Lillies and myself were correct from last year. So on that page 240 of 387, they requested $4,300 and were granted $3,000. So that was the amount that we actually allocated. Okay, does that help, Director McCormick?
Thank you. Yes, and I'm looking at that application now. Thank you. And they say that they want to continue to reduce the anxiety of Texada residents and also those north town in area A. So I don't know what numbers they have to back that up, how many calls or complaints. But I mean, yes, I understand that the base is broadened from what it was previously.
Thank you. Director Doubt and then Director Brander. Director Doubt.
That actually, I was just going to make, I think, the same point that Director McCormick had made. It was last year, the request was for Area D only. And this year, the group added Area A. My recollections from the questions at our previous Finance Committee meeting was that the group had said that they had had a call from somebody in Area A who was inquiring about getting services there. And it's, you know, I'm not in Area A or Area D, so it's a and I see the way that mathematics works out. If you include Area A and Area D, obviously Area A has the more population and the decision to be made. It's not really mine to make, but I just wanted to clarify that the request is for more money this year and to cover a larger area. And if I recall correctly, the application also had in it a suggestion that their work might benefit the city, and the city has its own animal control bylaws of whatever nature and has its own issues with trying to address those.
Thank you. And I see our corporate officer, but I'd just like to point out, so Director Brander, Director Elliott, but we don't have a motion on the table yet. So I'd like to request that maybe limit to clarifying questions or comments that we can help us get towards a motion so that we have something to debate, because we're discussing and it's clear that we don't really know exactly what's needed yet here, but trying to help us guide towards that. Corporate officer.
Oh, thank you, Chair. That is what I was going to state, is that we should probably get a motion on the table if we want to continue debate.
Okay, thank you. Director Brander, I'll recognize Director Brander and then Director Elliott, and then we'll maybe we'll have, and Director Gisborne has a time. So people who haven't spoken yet, I'll consider this the kind of round of questions, so let's say. Director Brander.
Okay, thanks, Chair. These two issues in areas A and D are tied together with that little and. I would suggest that we split these two motions, and then if that is granted, I would have a motion to make. I guess we don't even have a motion, do we? So I don't even.
We don't have a motion, so.
Okay, well, I'll make the motion that we deny a grant of 6,500 and change to WOWs for Area A grant. Okay,
so second. So we're gonna. So one motion on the table right now is that the committee respectfully deny 6,543 from Area A grants and aid has been seconded. And I know we'll get back to the other questions because I know that Director Elliott and Director Gisborne had still want to speak, but we'll entertain this. So Director Gisborne had his hands up. Actually, the mover of the motion, does the mover of their motion wish to speak first?
I'm okay.
And then if he wishes, well, if he didn't have his hand up, but just speaking. Okay.
Yeah,
seeing no hand. Director Gisborne.
Yeah, I'll be the bad guy on this one. So I grew up out in Paradise Valley. Feral cats, as I've mentioned, are an issue out there. I myself have captured feral cats and gone through the whole process of, you know, bringing them to the vet and all that kind of stuff. It is a hard thing to deal with. That being said, the regional district has a regional animal shelter service. I believe this year we budgeted just under $100,000 towards that service. And the population of feral cats, it fluctuates. If we do nothing, that feral cat population will fluctuate, as in it goes up and it goes down. It's not, okay, it's just going to keep exploding. What happens, as I've seen and I've witnessed firsthand in my own arms, is when the populations get high, you end up with what's called feline distemper. And it's an infection that spreads through feral cat populations and it shuts down their digestive system. It's a very sad infection, but that's how nature deals with that predator-prey model, and it's very unfortunate. The amount of funding that they're asking for to, you know, just deal with Texada or just deal with north of town is very, very high. And as the delegation said, they're not even bringing them to the local veterinarian clinics. They're bringing them over to the island. So if we do give the money, a lot of that money is leaving town. And, you know, if we do put this kind of money behind, you know, trying to deal with the feral cat population in the rural areas by trapping them and getting them all fixed and then bringing them back to whatever property they're on, this can very quickly escalate in terms of cost, because it's unfortunate that it happens in the rural area like this. And I do recall last time when they had an application specifically for Texada Island, and my attitude at the time was, if the director of Texada wants to support it, it's up to the director of Texada, and, you know, the voters will deal with that. But I'm starting to see that this application is kind of spreading. You know, they get a call for Area A, so they're requesting a significant amount from Area A. You know, I would expect that they would start getting calls from some folks in Area B, and therefore next year we would start to see similar increases. And it's unfortunate, but, you know, I'll be the bad guy and I'll say nature does what nature does. And I am in support of actually denying the application for Area A. Because, you know, I see the director of Area A as kind of on the fence because it's a challenging one, but I'll actually step in and be the bad guy on this one and just say no. If the director of Area A was saying I'm gung-ho for this and I'm all in support, I'll go, well, you'll have to answer to your taxpayers on this one. But no, I'm going to say no. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Is Director McCormick?
Yeah, thank you.
And then Director Elliott, and then Director McCormick, and then Director Elliott. Sorry, getting the order right, but
Chair, I've just had to read through the WOW's application and all of the things they've done and they intend to do. And I really don't see anything in there about Area A. I have to tell you, there's a lot in here about Texada, and the work that they've done and are doing is certainly appreciated. But in terms of this denying for Area A, I don't see anything in their application that would compel me to say, oh, but they're going to do this in Area A. So maybe they haven't done a very, you know, thorough job of presenting their needs as much as could be expected. But really, I see no reason not to support this recommendation to deny.
Thank you. Director Elliott.
Yes, thank you. So I'm of similar mind to Director Gisborne. I want to support the elected area officials when it comes to the kinds of things they want to support within their own areas. I'm seeing that Area A doesn't feel the need to support this particular application in area A. And I would support, you know, Texada or area D electoral area representative if they wanted to provide grants to that activity in their area. There's many different ways to address these issues, and I'm in support of supporting the area representatives for what they want to support in their areas for this type of thing.
Thank you. Director Lennox.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And I guess I should, I appreciate the support, and it's the same for me, but I guess Director McCormick really illustrated where my mind has been. I haven't seen data. I haven't seen people contacting me. There's been no indication in my area, and people are pretty darn vocal when there is, that there's a problem. And so on the other side of it, I know this group does valuable work. That's not what this is about. And so I think it's part of it is our, the way that the math breaks down according to, per 100,000. And I understand that actually makes the problem a little bit worse. So I guess what I'd say is if I had the data, when that comes before me, I'm willing to change my view. But at this time, I haven't heard that that's a need in my community. Thanks.
Thank you. And I'll just add a couple words to the delegation did mention work that was planned and done north of town, and that was made a bit clear. Now, in the application itself, the only thing I could see offhand is on page 247. It talks about in October 2023 north side district of Powell River, and then in 2024 ongoing both Texada and north of town. So it's kind of general, and so I don't think a case, and I concur with the comments made that maybe a case hasn't been made strongly why area A should contribute so much, and I concur with the comments of Director Elliott of supporting the reasonable stated wishes of the director from area A. So is there any further discussion on this motion? The motion on the table is to CAO.
Through the chair, I think you guys are finally coming around to a decision, which is great. But I'd like to point out that what you need to debate are the facts and the merits of the report and what's before you. We had some personalities come out, which in other instances could get you in big caca. And it also puts that director in a pinch, awkwardly. Kudos to Director McCormick for pointing out the facts, because that was when the tide finally changed, as well as when Director Lennox spoke from personal experience in that he has not heard of or seen of any problems in his area. There is where your debate lies, directors, in those merits and in those facts, not on supporting one or the other, because again, food for thought could get you in some heap of trouble down the road for voting just because you like to support somebody. Carry on.
Thank you for that. I
enjoyed that.
That was good comments. Is there any further debate on this? Okay, seeing none, then the motion on the table is to respectfully deny the portion from area A. All those in favor? None opposed. That carries. So that part of the motion was dispensed with. Is there any desire by the Director Elliott?
So I'm just going to go back to the question I had during the question round.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And it might be relevant to whether we can make the next motion or not. Since the grant application is got this calculation between areas, is it possible for us to split the two given the rules and regulations, or should we just turn down would it be more appropriate to just turn down the application altogether and ask them to submit a separate application in the second round that may target a particular area for approval for just that area? And so that's a question around process.
CAO?
The chair, I think it's perfectly fine right now for the board to make a motion for whatever amount that is within scope to be carried out of area D.
Corporate officer?
And just an additional, so in that secondary one, we would probably be advised to not include and north of Powell River. If you were considering area, the second part of 19, there is, we want to exclude that if you were just going to fund it from area B per se.
Okay, thank you. So we don't have a motion on the table. And I saw Director Gisborne, you had a question for the staff?
I was going to have a point of parliamentary privilege. I find the room is quite stuffy and I was wondering if we could get a door open.
That we can do.
My room's quite fine. Okay, Director McCormick.
Thank you. Chair, I would like to move under section 19, the second part of the motion, that the board approve a grant of $2,000 from the Area D grant and aid service.
Right, and perhaps without the north of Powell River language in there.
Yes.
Yes, okay. So the motion has the second part of the motion with 2,000 instead of 1956.85 and without the words "and north of Powell River." Is there a seconder? I saw Director Elliott. Okay, is there discussion on this motion? Director McCormick.
No, just to say that they are doing very good work on Texada. It is much appreciated, and we would like them to conclude that work. Hopefully this year will conclude that work. And the great benefit, of course, is when you stop a feral cat population from reproducing, eventually the problem is solved. So I don't see this as being a long-term ongoing commitment or ask, but for this year, I think it's a really good thing to get this done.
Thank you. And I'll just add a comment to that, which is I think once you get feral cat populations under control, especially on islands, they can remain under control. And a case, as a data point, Lasqueti Island, as far as I'm aware, does not have feral cat issues. I mean, there are once in a while some cats that show up at different places, but generally there's no population per se. I think they just aren't there. Okay, so if there's no further discussion on this motion for $2,000 from Area D grant and aid for the Wild Ocean Whale Society, then I'll call the question. All those in favor? None opposed? Carried. Okay, we're on to item 21, which is the Sandcastle Weekend, pulled by Director McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. And I would like to move that we approve a grant of $3,000 for Sandcastle Weekend, and that be split between areas A, B, C, and D on the same formula that others.
Okay, so seconded. So while Ms. Lilly's pulls the numbers so we can get them for the record. So the motion is to divide that up and support that from areas A to D. So and it's been seconded by Director Gisborne. Is there a debate on this? Director Lennox?
Yep, just briefly, Chair, as per our conversation a minute ago, I actually do see a regional benefit to the Texada Sandcastle Weekend. Many people out my way put it on their calendar and they get their butts over there. And I haven't been in a few years, but it's on my list. I want to anchor up though, right? But I mean, like, this is an example, I think, as I learn and we learned where things change. This is definitely something that should be supported by my area, and I know I'll carry our burden of it. It passes.
Thank you. Director Gisborne.
Yeah. We're not using the Economic Development Service this go around, thankfully. Make me very happy. However, that being said, Texada Sandcastle Weekend, I think, fits very well within economic development as a principle and as the service that we're not using. So I know that if I support this motion, it's going to be a bit more money coming out of Area B's taxpayers. And I know I like to be fairly cheap. It's hereditary. But, fair is fair. And I will support the motion that it comes out of areas A, B, C, and D. So thanks to Director McCormick for pointing out the income disparity. And yeah, I'm happy to support it.
Thank you.
Good. And I'll add myself to the list. I just, the only comment I'd like to make is this, this is a process we have to kind of figure out this, kind of pooled benefit, how we collect, how the different areas everywhere can collectively benefit over time. We have this 10-year summary, which was provided to us, which I found excellent to help us look back. And as we heard at the beginning, a lot of the grants, the allocations were based on history, but now things are changing and we're going to be seeing this. We're making adjustments now, and the adjustments will continue until we figure out a good way to make sure the right funding formulas are applied. And I think this, and that, as far as I'm concerned, it makes sense because it has a similar set of attributes as some of the other groups that we provide funding from A to D. So I think Director McCormick made a good case for that, and I concur with that. Is there any further debate on this motion? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? None opposed, carried unanimously. Okay, the next up was item 23 that Director McCormick pulled up, which was to deny the grant the recommendation was to deny the grant to Texada Health Services Society. Director McCormick?
Thank you. It's items 22 and 23.
Yes, items 22 and 23.
Item 22, and you know, I'm not arguing against the recommendation. I understand why this recommendation is here, but I have a question, and I understand why we don't fund healthcare facilities. That's absolutely not our job to do that. But part of this money is for a program to support cancer patients with additional expenses that they personally incur, having to go, you know, to a big city for treatment and needing accommodation, et cetera. And so is there not an opportunity for programs of that nature, you know, to be supported? We supported Dragon Boat Team going to you know, a learning event. You know, why wouldn't we want to support cancer patients?
Ms. Lillies, is there an answer for that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Through the chair, Linda and Cheryl and I had discussed this because we weren't sure initially either what to recommend. But we had determined that there already is programs in place for these types of cancer patients to access through the United Way, I believe, in Vancouver Coastal Health and possibly the Red Cross. So with that funding already being available, we weren't sure that the regional district should be, you know, implementing their own program in addition to those.
Okay, Director McCormick?
Yeah, follow-up question then. Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, we support the 22 and 23, and we promote, you know, this application to the hospital board. If they are not successful, is there still an opportunity, say for not the facilities, not equipment, not anything to do with stuff, but really just to support patients in their expenses for treatment? Is there an opportunity under intake 2 to provide a new application?
So that'd be a question for Ms. Lillies. I'll pass it over, but I believe even
would
if
that be considered as qualifying?
Right. Okay. Would it be considered as qualifying that portion of the application?
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair, yeah, they definitely can apply again. Linda's recommendation was that we recommend to them that they apply to Vancouver Coastal Health and attempt to get the money that way first, and then they could apply again for reconsideration. I'm going to defer the question also to Cheryl because I think she might have a little bit more information on that. Cheryl Morrison, our accountant.
Ms. Morrison?
I thank you through the chair. One of the considerations that we had was a large part of their request was for equipment that is funded and should be funded through Vancouver Coastal Health, and that the remainder was for items that would be outside of their approved budget from Vancouver Coastal Health. The small items of providing certain support and those things, in the past we have consistently denied support of giving funding through a group to individuals, and so that was why the whole of this application was recommended to be denied. Should they come back with a different program or a different request that they're having that they're going to provide actual service or those kinds of things, they would be welcome to apply, so long as it's not for items, from my understanding from our conversation with Linda, so long as it wasn't items that are covered or should be covered by Vancouver Coastal Health.
Thank you. And before I recognize, so I saw Director Dowd and Director Elliott and Director Gisborne. We don't have a motion on the table as far as I am aware. Is that correct, Corporate Officer? There's no motion yet. So I'll consider this a round of questions, but limited to questions about the recommendation, and because we need to get a motion on the table otherwise. Director Dowd.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with what's written in our report, is that not funding the $50,000 request, and it covers 22 and 23. And what I hear staff doing is talking about something different than what's in the motion number 23. And the motion number 23 talks about that the committee recommends to the board that the board promote the application from Texada Health Services Society to the Cathett Regional Hospital District for consideration. But I hear staff talking about referring the request to Vancouver Coastal Health, two very different things. I'm actually in favor of referring it to Vancouver Coastal Health, because I think they're the people that should be providing the health care on Texada Island, as opposed to Regional Hospital District, which I think is this body sitting in a different group with a Tla'amin representative, which is also collecting local tax money. So I just want to point that out. I'm happy with accepting what's in the package the way it is, but I'm not sure that the Regional Hospital District is the right place to refer it to.
Ms. Louise, I saw your hand.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Through the Chair, the reason that the recommendation states that it's through the Cathett Regional Hospital District is because I believe it flows through them. So they would request, the Texada Health Society would request through the Cathett Regional Hospital District, and then the request would be forwarded to Vancouver Coastal Health to request that they cover those costs.
Thank you. Director Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm seeing all the good reasons why it doesn't really, the entire application does not fit within our jurisdiction for these grants, but pieces of it might, similarly to supporting the food bank or other social aspects that we want to support through nonprofits. It's not really setting up a service of the regional district. It's more supporting nonprofits who are doing social, creating social goods within the community or supporting social needs. Texada Island residents are a little more remote than most, and it seems like they've come up with a way to support their cancer patients when they're really far from home. That is working through a nonprofit that could be definitely considered through a grant, but that's only a small piece of the grant application. So if we are to consider that, I think the application needs to be for that and not for the broader things that are that are kind of outside within the jurisdiction of Vancouver Coastal Health. And so I'm wondering if we can't have staff or somebody work with those folks to bring in a different application that is more narrowly focused on those social aspects that we could support.
Yeah, thank you, Director Gisborne.
Yeah, my mind is kind of all over the place on this application because some parts fits regional district in terms of social well-being, some parts fits regional hospital district for, you know, assets and infrastructure. But as the discussion's going around the table, the biggest target, which really should be stepping up to the plate, I think, is Vancouver Coastal Health. And I don't think it's just Texada. Like Texada, this nonprofit is doing great work. And, yeah, if it goes to regional hospital district, it might be hard to justify the entire region supporting a nonprofit group that's operating primarily on Texada. And I'm wondering, like, would it be more appropriate for this board to send a letter of support to the nonprofit group to try and get some movement from Vancouver Coastal Health. Or maybe this should even be like a resolution to UBCM, because it's not just Texada that gets into these kind of challenges. Like even locals, we hear about individuals that have to go down to Vancouver for an emergency treatment. They get flown down. After they get their surgery, they essentially get kicked out onto the street, and they're like, well, how the hell do I get back to Powell River? You flew me down to Vancouver. And it's kind of like our healthcare system. You know, they get you to the hospital, they get you looked after, and then they're like, okay, you got to find your own way home. And it's really inappropriate for a lot of people, not just on Texada. And I got to give kudos to the organization on Texada that's recognized this problem. They've stepped up. I think they're a worthy organization. They do deserve funding, but the challenge is going to become, you know, if we as a regional district provide funding, how many other organizations are going to come in and say, yeah, Vancouver Coastal Health isn't doing their job. Can you guys give us some more money? And that's where, you know, would it also be appropriate to have a motion to have a letter of support to Vancouver Coastal Health? And I'd be happy to also see this item also go before Regional Hospital District for consideration, because maybe a letter of support there will also help, because it's extremely frustrating, because I share the concern. It's not just Texada.
So I'd say actually what's most appropriate right now is to get a motion on the table. Because this was supposed to be for questions, that's fine. So we've had a round of questions and we don't have a motion, and I see Director McCormick's hand up, and then we can decide what we're doing. And then did Director McCormick have her hand up?
Yeah.
Then I see Director.
Yeah.
You did, yeah. And then I see Director Dowd.
And just to say that I think we may need to revisit our policy of benefiting individuals. Social needs require the benefiting of individuals. A food bank benefits individuals. Each individual walks away with a box of groceries. So we really kind of need to rethink that, because we're already really in contravention of it. So I don't think that is a valid reason. You know, I appreciate the support and the supportive words that I've heard around this table, because it is frustrating. And the Health Services Society has done a great job. Their biggest task has been recruiting a new position, which we now have in place, and we will all be meeting her next month. However, there are these needs that aren't met in any other way, that because we're on an island with limited resources that we have to, you know, travel, etc. So I totally get that. You know, if they, you know, we can support the recommendations in the report, because, and I'll even move them. And if you get a seconder, I'd like to continue to talk. Second.
Appropriate to get. Okay, we have the motions on this. Both of the motions, corporate officer?
2 and 23.
With an and between them. Thank you.
So whatever. You know, so I think they're worthy of support. I think if we can agree as a third motion to send a letter to Vancouver Coastal Health from the regional district, and support also sending this to the regional hospital district, and hopefully they could send a letter of support as well. That will help, you know, certainly help the ammunition. However, down the road, my question is, would an application strictly for you know, additional costs that would be only for cancer treatment, would that be considered by this committee, and would it be considered by staff as a valid expense or valid use of money?
Ms. Lillies?
Thank you, Chair. I will say that it does still, because of the policy, like Director McCormick pointed out, of benefiting individuals, there's a little bit of a conflict there, but you know, each application is at the discretion of the board. So really, I suppose, you know, staff can just push it to the board level or committee level and let them make the decision. I see Cheryl wants to talk to you. Thank you.
Using the hand, nice.
Hi, sorry. I wanted to also clarify that the interpretation of that clause of as benefiting individuals is strictly the transfer of money. So it's where a group is asking for money so that they can give money to individuals. That is where that clause comes into place, where they're providing a service such as the food bank, where we're giving them money and they give food or that kind of thing. That is not restricted, but where a group is asking for funds so that they can in turn give cash to individuals, that is what is prohibited by our current agreement.
Thank you, Director McCormick, and then Director Dowd.
So would hotel vouchers qualify? If the patient was given a voucher for 5 nights at the YMCA or whatever it was, would that qualify?
Ms. Morrison, CAO, maybe the CAO can answer that.
Through the chair, I hate to break up this great debate, but now we're straying way off the motion and talking about what if scenarios. I think that's should be saved for another time. They're great questions, but now we're questioning the policy versus the motion.
Thank you. Quite right. So I think that would be a useful thing to have in the future to really review that and get at possibilities, because I think that might be better to come through with a report or something. So, Director McCormick, are you okay with that, or do you have further? Okay, Director Dowd, and then I'll add my own name.
Well, I was like the CAO. I was going to try to get back to where we were talking about emotion, and I agree with the 3 motions that Director McCormick made to try to guess in advance whether the board will approve or not an application for one thing or another, and all of the what ifs, I think, is not something that anybody around this table can answer. What we can answer is whether we approve number 22, number 23 in the package, and for the board to write a letter to Vancouver Coastal Health. I agree with all those things and all of the other ins and outs and possibilities, and be better off at a future committee meeting where we could spend the afternoon talking about it.
Thank you. And I have a question for the corporate officer and then a comment about the 2 motions. Is the third part of it? I recollect that only the motion itself was for
22 and 23. We
Yeah.
did not consider a motion for a letter.
Okay, so I'll make my comment, but then I'll suggest I'll entertain a motion from Director McCormick to make an amendment, and we'll add that in. So my comment is, I think these 2 motions are appropriate. We're talking a lot about what may happen down the road of policies, or what the regional hospital district might choose to do and future intakes and this and that. I think the motions itself are to say this body does not denies the request, but we're going to promote it. We're basically send it over to the hospital district. The hospital district may do many things. The hospital district may choose to forward it to VCH. The hospital district may choose to send letters of support. The hospital district may choose to refer things back to this body for parts of it if we so choose. There's lots of things that body may do, but we're not that body today. We might be that body, same people. We're not that body today. We're just talking about sending it over there and they will do with it. So I'll leave it there and say that's the actual motion. And I support that. Director McCormick, would you like to make an amending motion?
Yes, and the addition under, I guess, 23. That committee recommends the regional board send a letter of support to Vancouver Coastal Health for the Texada Island health services issues identified in their report.
Second.
Seconded by Director Gisborne. So the debate.
Officer got the intent.
Wait, the corporate officer is good with the words. So any discussion on the amendment, which is to also add sending a letter of support, so a letter to Vancouver Coastal Health to support the initiatives being requested, for which funding is being requested. Is the wording satisfactory to you, corporate officer?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Okay, any further discussion on that amending motion, on the amendment? Seeing none, I will call the question on the amendment. All those in favor? None opposed? Carried. So now we're back to the main motion, which now has 3 clauses. Is there any final words? We've gone around quite a bit on the three pieces, the two in the package plus a letter? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? None opposed? Very good. So that brings us to pulling our remaining items off the table. And before we open debate, I'll just confirm with Ms. Lillies that given the changes that we have made to the package, that those motions are still supportable.
Yes, thank you, Chair. We actually have, it's all doable, and we now have $56,856.63 available for intake 2.
Very good, thank you. So clearly because we reduced, not increased, we're good. But I wanted to confirm, and we'll get updated numbers in the future. And actually, while I'm asking questions, I neglected on the Sandcastle weekend. Ms. Lillies, maybe I could ask for you to read out the numbers when we made the changes. I forgot to ask you to read the numbers for the disbursements for the allocations for A to D for the Sandcastle weekend.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Through the Chair, the Sandcastle weekend, because it was changed to being A, B, C, and D, we now have $1,417.13 from A, $489.64 from B, $669.42 from C, and $423.82 from D, which is the 3,000.
Thank you very much. We passed that recommendation, so it's that's what we did. Director Gisborne. So now we have our so in terms of process, corporate officer, correct me if I'm wrong, that we've pulled it off the table. The motion is on the table, so we're debating the consent package of all the items that were not pulled. Is that where we're at process-wise?
I was going to move that we take the item that's been tabled and bring it back for the assembly.
Okay, we need to make that motion. Okay, thank you, Director Gisborne. So the motion's been moved to pull it off the table. Director Brander, the doubt has seconded. Is there debate on pulling it off the table? Seeing no hands, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Okay, none opposed, carried. So now we have that package, which is everything we didn't pull. I won't enumerate them because I might make a mistake, but it was all the items that we did not discuss and the recommendations in the package. So is there debate on those items? Seeing none, I will then call the question. All those in favor?
Oh, CIO has a question.
Oh, CAO, yeah.
You voted with us then.
Yes.
Sure. I do not have a mover or a seconder or the block.
Yeah.
My recollection was that Director Gisborne jumped out in front and tabled it till after the other ones were going to be processed.
Okay, thank you. So we'll get a mover for the block.
So moved.
Director Gisborne, seconded by Director Lennox. Okay, any debate on the block now? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All those in favor? None opposed, carried unanimously, which is great. Thank you, CAO. It was a bit confusing there.
There eventually.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of that. We have no new business. Are there any questions? Is there anyone in the audience or the reporter who has questions for us?
Thank you, Chair. Galinsky from the Peak here. I'm sure it's in the report, but I'm wondering if the Assistant Manager of Financial Services can advise me what the total is for financial assistance for this year, the total amount of money available.
Total amount of total available, Ms. Lillies?
You're on mute.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, just pulling it back up because I had closed it. So the total being granted would be $221,241 rounded. And then, like I mentioned, it was leaving $56,856.63.
I thank the manager or assistant manager very much for the response. That was my question, Chair. Thanks for the opportunity.
Okay, thank you very much. We have no proposed in-camera session. We are, oh, Director Gisborne.
Yeah, can I get those numbers again that were just given to the press?
Do it
Okay,
after.
Ms.
Sure, we'll do it
Ms.
after, that's fine.
Okay, fine. We're good. We're adjourned.
It's different.
Thank you.
Good job, everybody.
Within my package.
Recording stopped. Numbers changed.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
changed.
okay.